This is the Energizing India podcast.
Welcome to the Energizing India podcast, a program that features conversations with key industry leaders, decision makers, and protagonists on how to bring about faster adoption of electric mobility in India. Typically, we feature CEOs of companies that are making a difference in this industry, but every now and then we have the fortune to talk to a super user, someone who's on the road, experiencing all of the challenges, the adventures that are put together by not only the car maker or the bus maker, but also the charger manufacturer and the charge point operator, sometimes even the grid, all of which have to come together in a symphony for users of the road to have a seamless experience. Today, we have the fortune of talking to Priyans M, a super user of electric vehicles in India. Priyans, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Priyans, tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an EV super user. How did you get there?
I run a company called Active Buildings. We are into indoor air quality monitoring. That's my day job. Given that we are in the green building space, it helps that, the promoters of the company also drive electric vehicles. That's how eventually we came into purchasing. That's how I purchased an electric vehicle. And I drive an MG ZS EV 2022 model. And it's been around 8 months since I got the car.
Interesting. And we had this conversation just before we started recording when I asked you why you went for an MG rather than a Kona or a Tata Nexon. And the comment you made was, well, at the point of your procurement, it was the one that had the most luxury, which is absolutely correct, right? The Kona, in fact, at the same price point, was a lot simpler inside.
The Kona was efficient. The Kona was simpler. And the Kona had the battery defect. That was happening globally. We did not know whether Kona is going to service the Indian vehicles or not. And being when I'm purchasing an electric vehicle, which is a new concept, which is a new gadget for our house, we did not want it to have any bad experiences as such. We wanted the experience to be as smooth as possible. And we believed that MG can provide us with that experience.
So you're a super user, but a cautious, early adopting super user, having done all of your research to get there. So I'm interested now, one of the things that makes you stand out as a super user is that you are the first, if not one of the first, to have done 10,000 kilometers in one go in an electric vehicles across India. Most people would call that crazy in 2022. So what possessed you to do that, Priyans? What were you trying to prove?
So a slight correction. What I've done is that I have totally driven around 20,000 kilometers in 8 months, and most of it has been highway driving. We have meetings all across the country for my work, so I tend to drive there because taking road trips was always a childhood dream, and now I wanted to see whether I can do that in an electric vehicle. And by doing that, I think I make a statement wherein you can travel sustainably, and it's time to move. It's time for people who can adopt this to adopt and show to the world that it's possible to travel in a very sustainable way.
So a lot of people don't buy electric cars because they say, listen, I need to drive on highways and I don't have the time to pull over for half an hour and charge my car. It's much easier to have an ICE vehicle come in 4 minutes, fill up with petrol or diesel, and you're off. Has there been a compromise in your journeys due to the time it takes to charge an electric vehicle?
Not really, because what happens is that charging break is often coinciding with either the calls that I have to take for work or my lunch break or just a refreshment break, because even the driving on Indian highways is very taxing and it takes a lot of energy from you, and you need to have breaks every 3 hours or 4 hours, which and you will find a charger nearby, so you can take a break, quickly charge your car for 20-30 minutes and move on. So that helps, and that helps in my planning also.
So as a super user, 20,000 kilometers in 8 months, I think every OEM, whether they make cars, buses or chargers, would want to have you in a forum to discuss the issues that you face. So I'm interested from the perspective of a user. What are the challenges you have seen in charging a vehicle on the road that the industry needs to be cognizant of and has probably not thought of just yet?
Correct. So I have a lot of feedback to give, and there are plenty of problems in the current infrastructure, given that it is still sustainable in a way that, you can, it works, but there are a lot of things that can be done to improve the infrastructure. One of the simplest problems that I've also mentioned in a blog that I write, where I document all my electric vehicle journeys, is that charge point operators need to come together to ensure that there is one app wherein they can see where all the chargers are, and one app to basically pay for the charger and not have multiple apps. This is just the tip of the iceberg where the problems start.
It's a fair point. What you're saying hasn't even happened in Europe, which has got the largest penetration. You still need to have you need to have a Fortum app or a MER app or many others. Whoever's Ionity, whoever's operating the area.
Sorry to interrupt. In Europe, you may have like 5 apps or 7 apps, right? In India, on my phone, I have 40 plus apps.
Because there's 40 CPOs.
Yeah.
True. So I think one of the things I struggle with is the concept that all of them need to be on an aggregating platform, which would then eradicate the value that the charge point operator brings, because it then kind of takes India in the same way that all the other industries India have gone to, which is oligarchy, 3 or 4 companies, family companies dominating industries, whether it's ports, airports, telecom, whatever you look at. So here you have this startup ecosystem with 40 or 50 people trying to bring a change to you. And if you aggregate them onto one platform, then as a user, you're agnostic and you don't have a preference, and therefore their access to funding is limited to no more than, there's no value proposition that they have. And so the access to funding is going to be rather limited compared to someone, say, like one of the big infrastructure companies that can put in 1,000 tomorrow.
So I get that, and the way they can differentiate is by having good charger networks. For example, let's say if I have charged at Xeon a couple of times, and if I like the Xeon network charger, I will, as a user, I will always want to go to a charger that I know will work. So they don't need to worry about losing the customers. For example, even charge zone operator or say Fortum, right? These charge point operators, they have chargers that will work 99% of the time. You will not get a fault. They use good quality components. And if a EV user is consistently driving on a single route, then the EV user will want to stick to the charge point, to the chargers where they're not going to face any problems, right? So losing the customers is not really going to be a concern if your service is good. And as far as the app is concerned, you can win over people by having great UX. None of the apps right now have great UX, which is also another pain point. But a single app that rules them all can probably have a good UX, which invites more people.
So Priyans, you mentioned you're a blogger. What is your blog called? Where can people go and read what you write?
So it's called Experiences with EVs. It's on Substack, and it's called EXP with EVs. I'm there on all social media platforms, and that is where typically I document my road trips. It has all the open source data, wherein what percentage did I pull in, and what was the charger that I was using, how much money did I spend. It has a very detailed map which is made by a friend of mine, which shows how the journey was in a single photo. Outside of that, what I've also started doing is that I've started writing some commentary on the existing EV infrastructure in India.
So let's talk about that existing EV infrastructure, because you came to the Energizing India Summit in November and you addressed the CEOs of the entire industry with this report, with the data analytics that you have done. Let's talk a little bit about this. What are you finding in the differences between the different parts of India, north, south, east and west, when it comes to charge point operators and charging infrastructure providers, so charger OEMs as well as CPOs?
Correct. Okay. So as far as CPOs are concerned, Tata is the biggest CPO that we have in India by a huge margin, by a magnitude. It's greater than all the other charge point operators put together in all the states, in all the regions. That is the power that Tata has right now. The other charge point operators, there are some charge point operators that are they're spreading themselves across various states, but they're sticking to North India, they're sticking to West India. There are certain charge point operators that are going deep in particular states. For example, Xeon is going very deep in Tamil Nadu. Anywhere you go in Tamil Nadu, you will find a Xeon charger. So I personally understand, and I personally would want to see charge point operators go deep rather than go wide. What happens in that is it is easier for the charge point operators because they understand the state policies, they understand how does the state work, what is needed to set up a charger there. And for a user in Tamil Nadu, wherever they want to go, they don't need any other app. They know that they can just focus on Xeon and they can survive in the entire state, right? For example, if I am traveling, say somewhere to Gujarat, or say I want to go to Kutch, I know that I'll need at least 4 to 5 apps. Because there may be different charge point operators in Gujarat, in Maharashtra, so that becomes a problem as from the user's point of view.
Then let's talk about the charging infrastructure. Each charge point operator has a preference to charging infrastructure. So, you've mentioned Tata, you mentioned Shazon, Xeon. They all have very different chargers because they have their own accredited partner companies that supply them. And they tend to, for an overwhelming majority of their stations, use those. So Tata is huge, and so they have a multitude of companies, where the others typically have 1 or 2. Do you find when you pull in with a vehicle, behavior of a charger to be different? And here's where I'm going with this question. We have CHARN, which is the Global Association for CCS2. India uses CCS2 charging protocol. And then you have OCPP, the Open Charging Protocol, right, for vehicles. And so the concept of both of these is that your experience as a user should be seamless. The charger is really a piece of infrastructure that's giving you juice. It's like a fridge, it could be Kelvinator, could be Godrej, could be LG. But essentially, your experience is seamless. You know where the freezer is, and you know where the rest is. The experience is seamless, right? Do you have that experience?
So, okay, when I pull in on a charger, usually I have seen the CCS2 guns, which is what all the vehicles, all the 4-wheelers in India have. You also, on the Tata chargers, you see CHAdeMO guns, which are not being used by any 4-wheeler operators. So we do not know why it is there. It is probably because Tata probably bought the chargers in bulk and they're setting it up.
There's also early regulations require that.
Okay, I was not aware.
That's not the case anymore, but 2 years ago you were required to do that. Yeah.
Okay. We see AC charging that is being provided by the charge point operators, and there are certain DC001 chargers that are also there, and there is a Bharat DC standard, right?
DC001.
DC001.
Which is an agglomeration of the Chinese standard.
The GBT and
the GBT standard. Yeah. Fortunately, we're not going down that road, and we've decided we want to be like the rest of the world and adopt the CCS2 standard. I hope it stays that way. Yeah. Every now and then, there's still a little bit of a murmur saying India should have its own standard and do its own thing, which will only increase the cost and reduce the technical.
Interoperability is so important, right? I mean, if I'm locked to a charging network, unless you have a charging network which is as wide as the Tesla supercharging network, which also has the ability to allow, they have their own connector, but now they have moved to CCS2, right? I do not see any 4-wheeler operator, 4-wheeler OEM doing that in India. So let's just stick to CCS2 for now.
So what is your biggest concern as a super user? And this is a loaded question, but we are an independent platform here, so we can ask questions without being worried about repercussions. Range anxiety has to do with resilience of the charging network. And when you as a super user get in a car and you're driving, say, from Bombay to Bangalore, you've got to be confident that 90% of the chargers you're going to encounter will be able to give you a charge, and if not, there's an adequate number of chargers back up further on for you to be able to juice up, so to speak. So the resilience of this network is important, and yet a charger is a piece of power electronics that needs love. You can't just keep it there and forget about it. It needs servicing. The only way to keep it reliable is to make sure that you're looking after it. And we're in such an early phase right now, as you've experienced with your own MG when you were driving. You could have issues that nobody thought of, not the car manufacturer, not the charger manufacturer, not the CPO, and that could cause you some issues. And yet India is an L1 focused country. And L1 means it's a zero-sum game. Cheapest wins, and cheapest will always be Chinese because they make in a week what we make in a year. They just have sheer advantages that we do not have in India. And so the opportunity to build a charging ecosystem in India in an L1 environment, your chances of India surviving and succeeding is 1 in 10. Does that worry you that you could progressively see a network of L1 tendered chargers that are just boxes of steel that don't give you a charge because nobody from China can service them, or they've got the cheapest pieces of equipment inside them?
So, see, if in the short term, if that happens, the users are going to reject it. I have been a part of multiple community groups wherein people post photos of the chargers wherein oh hey, this charger is not working, what do I do? There are certain community members whose names and numbers are so famous that if someone is stuck anywhere, like for example in the Nexon group, right? If someone is stuck anywhere, the Nexon EV users group, they get a call. The people who run the group, be it 3 a.m. in the night, be it 5 a.m. in the night, whatever, they get the call, and that is not how the charging infrastructure should be. The quality has to be there, otherwise the users are going to reject it. For example, Tata Power, right? Tata Power puts up chargers. The location of the chargers is also very important. Tata Power puts up chargers which are also in their industrial area. If you do not have a place for the user, for the EV consumer to go and relax, or not even a washroom or no places to eat, there is no incentive for me to go there and charge. If you just want to put up chargers just for the heck of it, or just so that you have the numbers, then that becomes a problem, right? The utilization rate of the charging network is in the single digits, right? So if you want your utilization rate to go up, you need to have better chargers, you need to have better quality of chargers, you need to have reliable infrastructure, and for that, going L1 may not always be the best case.
Okay, so I play a little game when I travel overseas. I rent always an electric car, and I pull into every charging station on the road that either is on the app or that you see, and I do a little statistic on how many chargers are available. And I've got to tell you, even in Norway, close to 45% of the chargers are typically unavailable, out of service to give you a charge. I've seen that in Germany, I've seen that in Italy, seen that in Australia, and this is not because they go L1, because it's such a hard environment to give you resilience in a network, right? We're not at the point of the petrol station in 2023, we're at the point of the petrol station in 1923, where you probably had the same issues in terms of resilience. Do you have a similar stat for India? Do you count how many are available or not?
Correct. So very funny thing. Just last 15 days ago, I did a road trip from Bombay to Delhi and back. And my objective for that road trip was just to go to new charge point operators that I have not been to before. And I would say that around 50% of the new chargers that I went to were not working. I could not charge at 50% of the chargers. It can also be possibly because the app was not working on my phone. I use an iPhone, so they may have an Android only app, or iOS app is not updated. It's as simple as that, right? So that is not there. Or there are some places where the hardware itself is switched off. It shows on the app that it's available. You can go, and once I reach there, it's no longer working, or I cannot charge my car, right? So it's pointless. There are certain apps wherein there are certain charge point operators with whom I spent like 1.5 hours trying to debug why my car is not being charged, and in one case it worked, in one case it didn't work. So
that's crazy. That's an incredible time commitment, 1.5 hours to get something to work.
Correct. I mean, I was doing that as an experiment, just because if I have to do Bombay Delhi, I know exactly the charges that I want to hit, because I know that I can pull in at a charger at so much efficiency, at such a percentage, and that allows me to plan my trips very easily.
Okay, so this sparked another question for me. One of the problems they have in Norway is they are now victims of their own success. 95% of vehicles sold from January 2022 to December 22 were electric. And it's such a rich country, everybody's got a country home. So what that means is on Friday, everybody leaves Oslo or Stavanger or wherever they live, Bergen, and goes to their country home. And on Saturday evening or Sunday evening, they'll come back. And the problem they have is incredible queues at charging stations. And you've got to wait an hour to connect and then wait an hour. So you're going to wait 2 hours now at the McDonald's or wherever else you've stopped. Today you're an early user, so as you said, you can go from Bombay to Delhi and you know where you to pull in and you know the charger is going to be available. But we forecast in Energizing India, the people who bought their car in 2022, if it was an ICE vehicle, that's the last cycle where an ICE purchase is a logical choice. When those cars come up for replacement in 3 years, so we're talking 2025, 26, the logical choice will be EV. At that point, what do you think is going to happen with the queues and how we're going to address it? Because in India, we do not build and they will come. We catch up, and typically we catch up 20 years later. You look at the bridges being built in Bombay. We take our time to make the decision, and so there's an incredible amount of user frustration along the way. Does that worry you?
Yes, it does. In fact, again, on my trip from Delhi to Bombay, on my return trip, I pulled in at a static charger in Byavar. It is the only charger nearby, and it's a very critical charging point there. And in my MG, I could skip a charger, and I pulled in because I knew that I'll pull in here with a low charge. I can charge my car fully and then go again skip a couple of chargers. As soon as I pulled in, there was a Tigor that pulled in right after me. There was a Nexon that pulled in right after me. The Nexon guy was like, okay, I am 2 guys behind, so I am going to leave. The Tigor guy waited, and Tigor also charges slower, so he had to wait even further before he could leave from Byavar and come down to Udaipur. So yeah, that is going to be a pain point. I do not understand. I do not know whether the charge point operators are planning for that yet, because when you're upgrading the infrastructure, right, to put up a charger, you need to get the correct permissions. You need to have the correct transformer load that is sanctioned. If they are getting the loads sanctioned for a high value, then it is easy for them to put up multiple chargers instead of just one charging setup. So if they are doing that, the charge point operators that are doing that will be winning, because they can quickly scale up where they are seeing high usage or high demand. But the people, I mean, that is one way wherein I hope that some of these charge point operators are doing that, because once the Tiago EV comes in, you will see at least 10,000 users, of which at least 1,000 new car owners who will want to take it on a longer road trip, even though it is not meant for that. But I mean, that is going to start putting in the pressure. I hope the charge point operators act quickly and put up more chargers, so that the entire EV industry does not get a bad rep because of non-availability of chargers.
So we're seeing 2 kinds of procurement decisions being made today, right? You have the larger companies putting in many small capacity chargers, 25, 30 kilowatt chargers. But then you've got the startups who are actually thinking big and putting in the 60, 120, 180 kilowatt chargers, and some even with dispensers, or talking about dispensers coming soon. As a super user, what do you want to see? Do you want to see multitudes of 30 kilowatts because they're faster to put in, but they give you redundancies in a charge station without it being too expensive? Or would you rather see the capability to charge cars faster and pump them out through 1 or 2 chargers?
In India, cars can't charge faster. I mean, the Tigor charges at 0.8 C. The Nexon charges at 1 C or slightly lower than that. MG can charge at 1.2 C. You do not have cars. These are mass market cars. I'm not talking about the Kias or the EQS that can pump in a lot of energy, right? They are a very small part of the segment. But if the car OEMs are not going to increase the charging speed of the battery, then it doesn't make sense to put up very high kilowatt chargers. You can have a quick charge, you move on, and you go to the next one. Having multiple chargers also helps in a way that if one charger is not working, you can always go to the next one. But if one high power charger is not working, for example, I pulled in at static in Udaipur. I pulled in at 2%. I went from Vadodara to Udaipur directly in one go.
There's range anxiety for you, 2%.
No, I'm so familiar with the car that I know how much exactly can I extract.
Can push it,
yeah. And the objective of my trip was not to charge at a Tata charger, because in my past trips I have been crunching some numbers and I see that I have spent way too much money on Tata Power, right? I wanted to distribute that wealth across different charge point operators.
So you're being democratic in your intentions.
Yeah. And so I pulled in at the charger, and it was in a basement. And I pulled in, so at 2%, charger is faulty. So then again, I had to call static. If that charger was not working, I did not have enough charge to go to another charger in that same city. That's an experiment that I'm doing, right? But a typical consumer would just go to a Tata charger and charge, because there are like at least 4 or 5 30 kilowatt chargers that are easily available in the city. But because static was a 60 kilowatt charger, I was like, I do not want to wait a long time. So I'll pull in there, I'll charge for an hour, and I'll go ahead to Jaipur. So that is a real example of how if the high power charger fails, then you can be really stuck.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I want to come at the question I asked you a little bit a short while ago through a different lens. As a super user, what do you think the manufacturers of cars, and then after the manufacturer of chargers, have not thought about to make the customer experience seamless?
Correct. First and foremost, do not treat your consumer as someone who's dumb. Be as transparent as possible. We understand an EV consumer today, even the one who's buying a 𝐃𝐫, they know that it's a new product. They understand. They are not going to blame the OEM for everything. As long as you are communicating to them what exactly is the problem, it is going to be okay. Users want that clarity. I'll give you an example, right? So I was on my trip. I was returning from Bangalore to Bombay. From Bangalore, I went to a charger in Davangere, which is like 300 kilometers from Bangalore. I pulled in at a Delta charger. I was at 15-16%. And I pulled in, I started charging my car. This was also a charger which I had charged when I was going from Bombay to Bangalore. So I knew that this charger works. I pull in there, I connect the gun, I initiate charging, the charging doesn't initiate. I try it a couple of times. I try the local hacks, reset the charger, switch off the car, switch on the car, do all of that, and still my car is not accepting charge. So when I switch on the car again, because there's a nearby charger at Hyundai, which is a slow charger, 7.4 kilowatt. So I'm like, okay, I can go there, I can charge for a couple of hours, then go to the next charger. But I cannot put my car in drive or reverse mode. The warning that I see on my car is vehicle control system's fault. This is a global fault that has happened in multiple MG 2022 models, and there is no clear understanding as to why this is happening. Right? I had to press a lot with the car OEM to understand what has gone wrong. Eventually, the one reason that they came up to me, they told me was that the voltage that the charger was giving to the car was not acceptable. So the car shut down, and the only way to fix that, get this, the only way to fix that is to take the car to the MG showroom, and it's a software fix. It's a software fix because there's a flag that has been raised. All the dealer has to do is connect their laptop, press a couple of buttons, and the car will start accepting charge. For that small thing, my car had to tow for 300 kilometers. I had to go back to Bombay because I had other work commitments. And then a driver drove the car from Bangalore to Bombay. Imagine the expense that MG had to incur just for a small software fix. I understand that a software fix cannot be open, or they cannot provide that option for me on the app to do that, right? But still, allowing when a user is stuck in this kind of situation, there has to be, because the car proclaims that it has internet inside. Where is that internet functionality, right? And okay, I mean, the blame is not just on the charger, on the car OEM. There's also the charger OEM, right? The charger, when I connect the charger, it is showing me an error code. Now in that state, I have to look up what is the error code.
You shouldn't have to say an error code. You should tell you what the error is.
Tell me what the error is, right? I mean, fine, you do not have enough space on the charger to show the error. You have an app, right? You have built an app. Why are you not sending me a notification that because of this error, we cannot charge your car?
So think from the perspective of the user.
Right?
Absolutely right. Yeah.
So these are some of the points wherein, first be transparent with the user. If things are broken, accept that they are broken, it's fine. People will plan around it. It's India. So
it's a very fair point that you raise, and the problem we have is that it's why we also created this podcast, and it's because people don't talk to each other, and it's not because people don't want to talk to each other. It's just that the industry is so new. Everyone's going off in their silos. The car guys are doing their own thing, the charger guys are doing their own thing, the battery guys are doing their own thing, the grid guys are doing their own thing, and the regulators are smoking some very good stuff, doing their own thing, creating regulations that really don't work across the spectrum anyway, and nobody is actually talking to anybody else. And the example I'll give you is, again, in Norway, where I had a brand new car. I've said this story before. It was a beautiful Audi, e-tron, and it had 4 kilometers on it. It was so new, given to me by Sixt, the car rental company. And we went to visit our customer 300 kilometers away. We were down to, it was winter, so the state of charge dropped very quickly, and so we were at 6% state of charge. The customer told us to go to a fast charging station that had 6 beautiful chargers. Fast chargers, 250 kilowatt capability. 5 of those 6 collapsed when the car was connected to it. And by collapsed, I mean they went into reboot. So you'd connect your car and the charger would just shut down and the screen would say reboot. And it's a half an hour reboot. The 6th charger, when connected to the car, said, identification error, reconnect. And we reconnected and then it started charging. But it was snowing, it was -6, it was windy, you're in the open, in the elements. It's not a nice experience at all. And you're stressed because you got 6% SOC. And I thought to myself, how can that happen in Norway, where you've got such a high level of penetration, where the world's best chargers operate, the world's best cars operate? Why is this happening? And the truth of the story is, it was a brand new car. And the charger recognized, you have software that I don't know. And therefore, I need to reboot, upload, download, and I'll be able to talk to you. But the screen only said reboot. So as a customer, you're like, bad charger, right? What's wrong with you? I'm in the cold. Why you reboot 4, 5 out of 6 are rebooting? What's wrong with you? You need to think from the perspective of the customer and go, it's not you, it's us. You have an issue, you have a brand new car, don't worry. Go have a cup of coffee and it'll all be okay. And you're absolutely right. But for this to happen, it isn't the charger manufacturer, because they are not thinking of that. They're thinking of resilience. They're thinking of infrastructure. They're not thinking about the consumer, because their customer is not the consumer, it's the charge point operator. So we all do need to come together as an industry, and it's not just India, it's globally. It will take some time, but I do completely appreciate from the perspective of the user. It's not a nice experience right now.
Exactly, right? I mean, even for the users, if I don't know what is happening, I will either blame the car or I'll blame the charge point operator, right? I will never think of the charger OEM. And I mean, it's not a pretty scenario for anyone.
I'm going to ask you a frivolous question. This is the last question that we ask everybody on our podcast. And you've said you've listened to some of the episodes, so you know the question that's coming. It's frivolous, but it always brings a beautifully pointed answer. And so I'll ask you the question, which is, if you had the opportunity to be the Prime Minister of India for one day, just one day, and you could make any decision you wanted to bring about faster adoption of electric vehicles in India, what would that decision be?
I've thought about this, and the only thing that could come up with was probably to ensure that our grid is completely of renewable energy. What that allows is that, I can then drive my car guilt-free. I do not have to worry where the carbon emissions are coming from, that propels the country to a stable and a sustainable future. So that is one of the very small things that I hope that I would be.
Well, I think Prime Minister Modi's been listening to you, because just yesterday he promulgated the hydrogen policy of India, setting aside many billions of dollars to make sure that our entire energy system moves away from hydrocarbons to renewable energy, which is solar, wind, wave, all converted to hydrogen, which will give us zero emission mobility and zero emission energy, static energy as well. So a great answer. It spurs one more question on, and although I said last question, I want to add a rejoinder to that, and that's because you're a super user and we don't get to ask this question. What are you most excited about over the next 3 years for the EV industry?
I would want to see people having their first cars to be an EV, people who are aspiring to move from a two-wheeler, who are planning to buy a four-wheeler for their homes. They would want to buy a four-wheeler electric vehicle. Given that we have a great uptick in the two-wheeler EV segment, people are already familiar with that concept. Once that happens, they will be a lot more confident to buy their new four-wheeler EV. And to see a lot of green number plates in my city is something that I am very much I'm very excited about that. Every time I see a green number plate, I am like, oh, here is another EV, here's another EV.
You must be happy when you come to our campus then with him and
exactly
number plates that you see. Priyans, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Really nice to hear things from the super user's perspective. I'm sure most of our listeners would have appreciated your candid feedback. Thank you very much, and we look forward to having you on the program very soon again.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you.